Do you want me to speak now? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Of course, we are deeply shocked and deeply regretful about the results of last night's broadcast.
I simply don't know. I can't imagine. I mean, you must realize that when I left the broadcast last night, I went into...
In October 1938, a 24-year-old actor-manager, Orson Welles, caused panic across the United States with a radio version of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds.
People in the streets see it now. They're running toward the East River, thousands of them. Now the smoke's spreading faster. It's reached Times Square. People are trying to run away from it, but it's no use. They're falling like flies. 100 yards away. It's 50 feet.
X2L calling CQ. 2X2L calling CQ, New York. Isn't there anyone on the air? Isn't there anyone on the air? Isn't there anyone?
You were aware of terror at the time you were giving this role? Were you aware that terror was going on throughout the nation?
Oh, no, of course not. You know, we did Dracula, and it seemed to me during Dracula I had high hopes that people would react as they do in a movie of that kind, and I don't know that they did, particularly, and so I've given up. One doesn't believe in the radio audience much. You don't know that whether they're listening or not. You have no idea how many people are listening or what they're thinking. I had every hope that the people would be excited as they would be at a melodrama.
One person who got excited was the new president of RKO, George Schaefer, who'd taken over in December 1938. The first thing he did was to revive the system of independent production units introduced by David O. Selznick. The Mercury Theater, Orson Welles' company, seemed an eligible candidate, the only drawback being they'd never made a film. But if the young Welles could cause such a stir with a radio broadcast, what couldn't he do once he learned to make a movie? In 1942, Orson Welles' career as a Hollywood producer, director, writer came to a spectacular end with the South American fiasco of It's All True. He'd been at RKO for only 3 years, and in that time had made 2 remarkable pictures. The Magnificent Ambersons, which was finally taken out of his hands by the studio, and before that, his first picture, Citizen Kane. Business. Luella Parsons was the syndicated Hollywood correspondent for William Randolph Hearst's newspapers. The word had reached her that the picture was a thinly disguised expose of her boss. She demanded a private screening.
I ran the picture with Luella. This was quite an experience. Bob Wise and myself, Luella and her chauffeur were the audience for a running. And she left sometime toward the latter part of the picture in high dudgeon. And I remember the chauffeur stayed. And at the end of it, he said, "Very good picture." She was outraged, just absolutely outraged. And of course, the result was all sorts of things.
Here in the RKO archives, a batch of notes left by, I assume, an RKO switchboard operator or secretary. Her name's Yvonne. This one, 5:40 p.m., Luella Parsons called. She is asking for Mr. Schaefer's home telephone number and says it is a matter of life and death to RKO. 6 p.m., Miss Parsons said she could only wait 5 minutes for you to return her call. She says RKO is going to have one of the most beautiful lawsuits in history if they release Citizen Kane.
I had to get on a plane to go back to New York. at RKO's command to show the film at a projection room at the music hall, show the film to the top executives of all the picture companies, not the vice presidents in charge of production on the coast, but the Kents and the Skouras, the people who were the presidents and chairman of the board of all the major companies, to show it to them and their lawyers. And the whole purpose of this was for them to determine, after seeing the film, these industry leaders, whether they would say to RKO, go ahead and release it, or RKO, in the interest of our business, for the well-being of our business, put it on the shelf, don't release it.
Hearst newspapers imposed a countrywide ban on advertising and publicity for Citizen Kane. Many of the major cinema chains were scared off and refused to take the picture. It was a disaster at the box office, but the critical reception was overwhelmingly favorable.
I like the picture. Oh, it's really sensational. It says outside it's terrific, and it really is.
I have never seen a more striking finish in my life than that one to Citizen Kane. Acting, setting, direction, everything has been so little short of stunning.
It was obvious when you saw it was a great picture. But that doesn't always mean that it's going to do big money at the box office.
And the studios were after the money.
Naturally, we were not in a very strong financial situation at the time, and we were dependent on getting more revenue. And we thought this acquisition of Mr. Welles would have done it, but it didn't.
Before the long-term problems with Kane were apparent, Welles had already been plunging ahead with his next projects for RKO, sifting through 40 possible subjects in the script department, from the brothers Karamazov to A Life of Beethoven. Partially out of desperation, he settled on Booth Tarkington's Southern States historical novel, The Magnificent Ambersons, which the Mercury Players had performed on radio in 1939. Although The Magnificent Ambersons looks immediately like a Welles picture, he had to make it without two of his most crucial collaborators. Neither art director Perry Ferguson nor cameraman Greg Tolan was available. Tolan's replacement, Stanley Cortez, had worked almost exclusively in B pictures, but Welles was intent on camera virtuosity at least as impressive as Kane. This was to create appalling difficulties for sound supervisor James G. Stewart.
There were many sound problems on Magnificent Ambersons. The most important was that it was shot at Pathé Studio. And one of the early scenes that were shot was the big family reunion party and ballroom with the whole family. Orson shot this entirely on a crane. And a crane was the biggest crane that we could get in Hollywood. The floors of Pathé Studios were probably at that time 25 or 30 years old and were never meant to carry that kind of weight. Every time the crane moved, the floors squeaked. It made the soundtrack absolutely impossible to use. And he went from one person to the other, if you've seen the picture, of course, went from one person to the other and from one group to the other with continuous dialogue from the various people.
What did you say your name was?
Morgan.
Oh, well, I'm certainly glad you're back.
It's nice to be back, too, Jack. It's been a long
Who's
time.
that?
Oh, I didn't catch his name when my mother presented him to me. You mean the queer-looking duck?
The who?
The queer-looking duck.
Oh, I wouldn't say that.
One with him's my Uncle Jack. Honorable Jack. I thought everybody knew him.
He looks as though everybody else.
He called me to the stage and said, we're going to have to replace all this dialogue. And I, of course, looked at it, shocked, and knew that I had to do it.
Where do you live now?
We've lived all over.
What do you keep moving around so for? Is he a promoter?
No, he's an inventor.
Oh? What's he invented? Georgie. Grandfather?
Just lately, he's been working on a new kind of horseless carriage.
Horseless carriage?
For the time, it was an astonishingly elaborate piece of post-syncing, though there was much more to come. Later in the picture, there's a crucial scene where the entire family spend an afternoon out in the snow. It becomes a confrontation between the old world of the horse-drawn sleigh and the new world of the horseless carriage. Welles wanted absolute realism. He refused to shoot it in the studio, and there's not a lot of snow in Hollywood.
And Mr. Welles wouldn't use the ordinary things of shaking papers and stuff. He wanted the real thing. So we located an ice house in the east part of Los Angeles and put the set there. I think it was the sled that this young couple was in the sled and it tumbled into the snow. They crushed these huge blocks of ice and with a wind machine blew them over the set, and it was just lovely, and their breaths were all steamy and so on. And on the back of the set, at the other far corner, there were these sticks lying and standing against the walls, and they were frozen fish, and they smelled bad. But it looked beautiful. It really looked beautiful.
All that snow becomes you. That's right, it does.
In the picture, you see the family riding through in the horseless carriage, and the 4 people in the carriage are conversing.
All aboard!
Orson's solution of this, which is really unbelievable, he recorded the dialogue on a non-synchronous phonograph record. It wasn't even in sync with the camera. And he played it from a balcony up in this big reverberant cavern. You couldn't stand on the stage and understand the dialogue, and the people in the carriage were trying to mouth to it, and it was not going to be in sync with the picture anyway.
You're the same Isabel I used to know. You're a divine and ridiculous woman. George, you'll push him to get started, won't you? Push.
So I watched Orson, and I watched what was going on, and I thought, here we go again. So I walked over to him at the end of the scene, and he stood for a moment, he turned around and looked at me, and he said, Jimmy, you're going to have quite a bit of trouble with this. I said, Orson, that's an exaggeration. I said, is that track going to be in sync with the picture? No, Jimmy, that's just playing. I made that in the office. So we did it, but it was a massive, massive job.
Your father wanted to prove that his horse's carriage would run even in the snow. It really does, too. Oh, it's so interesting. He says he's going to have wheels all made of rubber and blown up with air. I should think that explode. But Eugene seems very confident. Oh, it seems so like old times to hear him talk. Broke the bank at Monte Carlo.
I did this on the RKO music stage, as a matter of fact, without Orson being present, with each actor separately, went through and did all of their lines. Then I took and combined all of those lines, along with the noise of the horseless carriage. And I was very proud of it, very proud of it. And I ran it for Orson. This was our normal procedure. I did the work first and then got his opinion. I ran it for him, and he sat for a moment and said, Jimmy, it's fine, but I don't have any sense of motion of the horseless carriage in their voices. As soon as he said it, of course, immediately apparent. It was too static. It's his fault now that you see all the time in our pictures. But he was very conscious of it. So I did it all over again. And I did it over with a 12-inch plank suspended by sawhorses, myself sitting on it and bouncing it up and down while the actor or actress sat on the same plank, and I tried to match the little movements in the car, not successfully, but adequately.
I knew you were doing that. It was nice of you.
Wasn't much of a fall to speak of. How about that kiss?
Hear them cry, wish to die, and see him wink the other like the man who broke the bank at Monte Carlo. As I walked along, the boys below with an independent air. Hear the girls declare,
After all the effort that went into Ambersons, the irony is that the film was changed and savagely cut by the studio in Welles' absence. This sad postscript is now a familiar part of cinema history. It was a blow from which Welles himself says he never recovered.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
The reason for his absence was America's sudden involvement in the Second World War, with the bombing of Pearl Harbor in December 1941. The Magnificent Ambersons was still in production when Welles was recruited for the government by Nelson Rockefeller and John Hay Whitney and sent on a bizarre goodwill mission to South America. Its purpose was to counteract the spread of fascism. Welles received an official cable 2 weeks later on December 20th. This is it, the cable dated December 20th, 1941. To Orson Welles from John Hay Whitney. Dear Orson, we understand you are willing and may be able to undertake trip to Brazil, where you would produce motion pictures in cooperation with Brazilian government. Personally believe you would make great contribution to hemisphere solidarity with this project. Regards. What happened next was to prove one of the most disastrous episodes in Welles' career. It began with characteristic enthusiasm and flamboyance.
When I came back from an IATSE meeting in New York, I found Welles very busy getting together a plane load of people, not just 2 or 3 people, but a plane load of people to take down to South America with him. And nothing I could say could make any difference because Rockefeller had approved it and Schaefer had approved it.
Among the group detailed for South American duty and entrusted with a large part of RKO's stock of cameras was Joseph Byrock.
We left on Tuesday night. I called my wife at 4 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. Says, I'm leaving at 6 o'clock to go to South America. She says, 6 o'clock, you don't have anything packed. So I came home and packed and went to the studio and left. So that's how quick everything was.
Also assembled for the group, Secretary Betty Amster.
We flew down on a big Pan-American clipper ship. We made a slow trip down and saw a lot of South America on the way, and the crew was aboard the ship. Orson was not, and we got to know each other pretty well, and they all seemed like wonderful, wonderful people to me and made a lot of fun of me. I was the only woman on the trip. In Rio, I learned that I had to earn my keep, and I typed a daily record of everything that happened. And besides that, we danced at the Urca, the great casino, almost every night. And I danced with most members of the crew and danced and danced and danced.
The expedition had set out to Brazil with only the sketchiest idea of what they were to shoot. There was talk of a multi-part picture reflecting South American life, mixing drama and documentary elements. The initial idea was to shoot a segment at the Rio Carnival, though Welles had never been to a carnival and confessed something of a distaste for them. However, it was known to be a spectacular affair, and it was just about to happen.
Orson arrived just on the eve of Carnival, and they were set up to shoot Carnival with whatever was at hand. So for a week or two, the crew was very, very busy.
Welles was busy improvising, shooting some early scenes in black and white to get a documentary feel to the film. He wanted to shoot in Technicolor, but was wary about its effect, fearing it would give an artificial look to the film. When he did succumb, anxious to avoid such staginess, he refused to take the official color consultant.
The black and white cameraman took a unit out, the Technicolor cameraman took a unit out, and the other operator and myself as an operator too each took a unit out on 16 millimeter color. So we went on our own, photographed everywhere we wanted, did anything we wanted.
Once Welles had marshaled the cumbersome equipment for Technicolor shooting, there was still the problem of the light levels.
We had no lights for the Carnival. We borrowed all the anti-aircraft lights from the Army and shot day and night with 80 Brazilian soldiers with a lieutenant saying, "A la izquierda, turn the light over here to the left." And so they would turn the light to the left, this searchlight.
Much of the footage Welles shot in Rio has been lost or destroyed. The scenes that are being shown in this film in 3-strip Technicolor have been printed from the few rolls of nitrate stock that remain. The first rumblings of regret now arrive from Hollywood in a cable from George Schaefer. Dear Orson, tremendous amount of personal embarrassment. Stop. Hope black and white material can still blend in with Technicolor. Stop. Most anxious you bring this through at least possible cost. Stop. I want you to believe me that I am personally on the hook for the whole South American venture. Stop.
We worked 24 hours a day for 4 days. The carnival never stops. So what happened, he got us all together the next day. He says, okay, he says, take a week off, and at the end of a week, come back and find out how the hell we can make a picture out of this.
I spent a great deal of time in the American Library researching everything that could possibly serve as background for the picture that was being shot in Brazil about Carnival. And one simply fed it into a giant hopper. The writers who had been engaged, the Brazilian writers, were doing the same thing.
We hired, at that time, some of the best writers in Rio. We built up a research file that was extraordinary. Why he was so effective in these countries is because he knew people, and he knew what the geography was, and he knew what the mineral content was, and finally he was giving lectures on the art of the primitive Mato Grosso province, things like that, but he was prepared.
Welles was lionized in Brazil and took to his role as envoy with enthusiasm. Not so much as a propagandist for America, but as an advocate for the people and culture of Brazil. And he began to make regular broadcasts back to America for CBS Radio.
The golden beaches on the Copacabana, the casinos, the smart women and the pretty girls. But there's another side of Rio. You hear it? Not a sceney side, not at all. There isn't a jazzsmith up north who could ever express it. Everybody dances to it. It's called samba.
Welles threw himself into the Rio nightlife with equal energy. He was particularly taken with Rio's grandest casino and night spot, the Urca, whose floor show he praised in a local paper. One of the chief attractions at the Urca was the 26-year-old singer and dancer Grande Otelo. Welles took to him immediately and decided later to give him a role in the movie.
E depois do show, terminou o show, eu fui me sentar na mesa do Orson Welles. Foi uma das poucas vezes que eu fui ao Grill Home da Urca. E perguntei a ele se ele tinha gostado do meu trabalho. Ele simplesmente me disse, "You overacting." Você super atuou. Aí minha cara caiu, fiquei envergonhado. Nunca mais quis saber quem é que estava no público, nem coisa nenhuma. E tratei de fazer o meu trabalho sempre como todos os dias.
Eu trabalhava no Cassino da Urca. E ele frequentava o Cassino da Urca. Aí ele conheceu o Otelo, também informaram a ele quem era o Otelo. Ele viu o Otelo, achou o Otelo, viu o Otelo no palco, achou o Otelo muito engraçado, muito bom. E ele, então, contratou o Otelo. Ele não sabia para que estava contratando. Eu perguntava ao Otelo, Otelo, o que você vai fazer no filme? Eu disse, não sei. Então nós começamos a conversar, a falar, e ele começou a chegar a gente.
Although black and white could mix more freely than in North America, this was strictly forbidden among the audience at the Urca Club. If you were black like Otelo, you were only permitted on stage.
Então eu não sabia o que estava se passando, e mesmo que eu soubesse, na época eu não poderia fazer grande coisa, porque eu era uma espécie de alfangatê do Cassino da Urca, que era a grande sociedade do Rio de Janeiro na época. E eu, um pouco deslumbrado também, porque eu tinha menos idade, não procurava me interessar a fundo pelas coisas. Me bastava estar ao lado do Orson Welles, ser amigo de Orson Welles.
During the daytime, Welles was occupied with trying to turn what was essentially documentary footage into an Orson Welles film. His plan was to restage elements of the carnival with particular performers, lit and composed in his own distinctive way. None of this footage has survived. By all accounts, progress was slow and difficult, and the many counter-attractions of Rio life hard to resist.
Realmente, o Orson Welles gostava de beber, não se pode negar. Mas acontece que todas as vezes que nós chegássemos no estúdio, eu e o Erivelto, que trabalhávamos com ele, se chegávamos às 7h15, o Orson Welles já estava no estúdio apontando o relógio, porque ele já estava lá para trabalhar. Então, o Orson Welles aqui sempre foi um trabalhador, sempre trabalhou 24 horas por dia, sem parar.
A impressão que me deu que ele queria fazer uma obra férica sobre o carnaval, porque ele ficou alucinado quando viu gente sambando na rua. O Erivelto, por exemplo, teve a ocasião de levar ele para a porta do municipal, que estava cheio de gente. Ele ficou doido quando viu aquilo. A música, a coisa. Fantástico. Eu tenho a impressão que ele ia fazer uma obra assim vamos dizer, de ficção científica sem trucagem, entendeu?
At the scandalous Teatro Municipal, Wells saw the races mixing with complete freedom. The big hit of the 1942 carnival was the samba Praça Onze, the name of the principal square of the Black Quarter of Rio. It was written by Erivelto Martins.
Que foi sucesso no Carnaval de 42, que ele assistiu. E o filme foi feito em 43, teve sendo feito em 43. Então, o leitmotiv do filme é o meu samba Praça Onze, que é o sucesso do ano anterior, que é eu cantando o desaparecimento da Praça Onze, a praça onde o sambista desfilava, onde as escolas de samba desfilavam, que era o local do samba espontâneo. O povo não tinha turismo, não tinha alto-falantes, não tinha banda de música, era música espontânea.
Vão acabar com a Praça 11, não vai haver mais escola de samba, não vai. Chora o tamborim, chora o morro inteiro, favela, Salgueiro, Mangueira, Estação Primeira, guardai os vossos pandeiros, guardai, porque a escola de samba não sai.
Adeus, minha Praça 11, adeus, já sabemos que vai desaparecer. Leva contigo a nossa recordação, mas ficarás eternamente em nosso coração.
Difícil para quem não entende, só trabalha com uma parte comercial, entender. E ele sentiu isso.
Mr. Orson Welles, Copacabana Palace, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Cable where I could phone you Saturday around noon New York time. Regards, George Schaefer. Await your call, 272-416. Fondest regards. Dear Orson, I've been trying for past 2 days to reach you on phone, but unable to get through connection. Stop.
There were several times the studio got a little bit peeved with Orson Welles. And to make it tougher on him, they wouldn't send us Technicolor film. Didn't matter to us. We were getting paid. We were sitting down there having a wonderful time.
He acted very strangely with Brazil. Besides, he had a relationship with a girl down there, and he would disappear for maybe 2 or 3 hours when they were supposed to be shooting. I guess some of that was brought out in the Lynn Shores reports.
Lynn Shores, Wells' production manager, had begun to panic. He started to write a succession of letters detailing his many agonies to the head of production back at RKO.
Dear Walter, I am enclosing working report for the week April 7th to 13th inclusive, our 12th week here. Last Friday, Wells ordered day and night shots in some very dirty and disreputable nigger neighborhoods throughout the city. I was advised by the assistant director that this would cause trouble if we were caught, as the government is very touchy on the colored question down here and even prohibits sightseeing cars from taking tourists into these sections. As Wells could not be located, this is the day he ducked Schaefer's telephone call all day, I finally sent the company out.
We didn't quite realize that the man was as destructive as he was quite as to tread carefully on this term, the racist that he was.
Shores went so far as to write to the Brazilian Ministry of Information, which was giving Wells the facilities to film.
Dear Dr. Pessoa, I feel I must bring to your attention, in confidence, a matter which has been troubling me greatly. I still find myself unable to control the tendency of Mr. Welles to utilize our cameras in matters which I do not feel are in accord with the wishes of the Brazilian government, and I am sure not in harmony with the feelings of our executives in Hollywood. This matter which I refer to is the continued exploitation of the Negro and low-class element in and around Rio.
I've been trying to reach you on telephone last 48 hours. Must talk with you, George Schaefer.
We had more on those people that were with us than the studio had on us. We could blackmail anybody that was down there with us. You know, like I say with Orson Welles, and we could black. There's too many people. We're staying with too many people. And too many people down there. At that particular time, 70% of the people in Brazil were black or had black blood. So there was nothing to... We had one man, I hate to say what department he was in, but he was one of the guys that I'm going to be at the end of 6 weeks, I'm going back to Hollywood. The end of 6 weeks, he had nothing. He was living with the red-headed black girl. He didn't want to come home. Matter of fact, he came back here at the end of 7 or 8 months and went right back again. Left his wife and went back down there.
In this Welles footage of the Teatro Municipal, Joe Byrock appears sampling the pleasures of the nightlife. In another rare moment, Welles himself is glimpsed on the left of the picture, filming and then adjusting his 16mm camera.
It was a bone of contention between RKO and Orson. What he was shooting, what the carnival consisted of. The carnival for him was essentially a black story. The story of Brazilian music started in black communities, in the slums, just as jazz started in the black communities and made its way into the white strata. So they were very unhappy with what he shot.
Lynn Shores also seems to have reported that Orson Welles was filming the seedier side of life. What was your interpretation of that?
We didn't want the seedy side shown. We wanted something uplifting, and we weren't getting it.
E recebia sempre reportagens, recebia sempre notícias de que Orson Welles filmou o dia inteiro só negros. E o Itamaraty achou que realmente, o Itamaraty é o nosso Departamento de Relações Exteriores. Realmente, o indicado, o enviado da RKO estava com a razão, que estavam filmando muitos negros. Então, a sociedade brasileira se movimentou no sentido de boicotar o filme do Orson Welles através da RKO. E como, de fato, boicotou e deixou o Orson Welles sem dinheiro.
The studio personnel had lost confidence in Welles. We were not getting any very constructive information from Brazil or in any part of South America. And I, for one, was very unhappy about the whole situation.
Reg Armour's boss, George Schaefer, was so unhappy that he decided to send an RKO vice president, Phil Reisman, to sort things out in Brazil. This fascinating document is a verbatim transcript of a telephone conversation between Reg Armour in Hollywood and Reisman in New York. You're elected for Rio, brother.
He's telling everyone the picture will cost $1 million. It's going to be a documentary film and we'll never get it back. George is sending me down there with the right to shut the goddamn thing off if I want to, and bring him home and take the loss right now.
I saw Magnificent Ambersons and Journey into Fear. They're both bad.
I would like you to send me a consensus on both pictures. And put Citizen Kane in, too, showing how much money we will lose.
We may break even on Kane, but that will be all. We'll be lucky if we do. George will lose his job out of this.
George wrote Orson a strong letter, which I am to deliver. After he has read the letter, he will either come back, as George says, or quit.
I think Orson wants to stay out of the country. He wants to duck military service.
I think I could get the authorities to take him off our hands.
This picture will put us back in 77B.
You really think so?
Yes, I do, Phil.
Offhand, how much have we spent since he went down there?
I will get that figure and mail it to you.
Reg, give me a complete picture of what we have spent and what we will have to spend, and make it as tough as you can.
Well, it was just as the picture was really, truly getting underway. And there were many arguments about a big Las Vegas nightclub review of Pan America. All of the countries came out and sang a little bit of their song, and it was a beautiful thing with lots of beautiful girls and the flags of each nation coming out in a great Pan America number. And they felt the budget was too high on that, and finally RKO, through Schaefer, said, well, maybe we'd better stop this. It's too far away and control it. Maybe we'd better send somebody down, finish this picture off, and get those boys home.
The announcement by RKO and all the Rio papers that they would henceforth not be responsible for any debts of Mr. Orson Welles signaled the end of the South American adventure.
Orson Welles, quando foi embora, me ofereceu uma cigarreira de prata com uma homenagem muito bonita. Cigarreira essa que numa das minhas bebedeiras eu acabei perdendo dentro de um táxi. E um chofer achou e me disse, olha, achei tua cigarreira com inscrição e tal. Eu não vou te dar não, porque eu vou guardar de lembrança. E por aí ficou. Ficou a minha saudade do Orson Welles, ficou a minha vontade de ver o filme que eu tinha feito, o primeiro filme para o estrangeiro, e mais nada. Essa é a outra oportunidade que eu tenho de fazer um filme para a Europa de fala inglesa. E eu agradeço muito essa oportunidade que estão me dando.
O que é essa saudade? Está perguntando por que essa palavra saudade?
Saudade, meu caro diretor, não tem tradução. Se você quiser traduzir, você dirá que é uma certa melancolia de não termos mais aquele amigo certo, das horas certas. Então, ficou saudade.
As a last desperate effort to pull together the film that he thought could still be made, Welles begged a final $10,000 from RKO and went to the remote town of Fortaleza in northern Brazil to film the lives of the peasants there. The scenes were intended as background to the story of 4 local boatmen, or jangadeiros, who had made an epic voyage to Rio on a flimsy raft to protest about the harsh conditions of their life. Making the film in such a remote area and with such limited means taxed Welles' ingenuity to the utmost. But 4 men on a raft is yet another tantalizing Welles might have been. The Fortaleza filming was never intended as anything more than a golden handshake to Welles. He was sacked by RKO and his long-suffering patron, George Schaefer, replaced as head of the studio. The South American footage, much of it still unprinted, languished in various vaults for 45 years, a perennial embarrassment to successive regimes at the studio. The film is now dangerously decayed because of the nitrate base of the film stock, and it seems improbable that any more scenes can be salvaged. As an ironic revenge on Welles, his Pan-American pageant idea reappeared in the 1945 RKO film Pan Americana, now safely contained in the studio and sanitized for popular consumption. The new regime at RKO proclaimed a new motto: showmanship instead of genius. It was, of course, a perfectly overt reference to Orson Welles. The new boss at RKO was Charles Kerner, who had run their chain of movie theaters but never produced a picture. Even so, his regime was to be one of the company's most successful financially, and under very special circumstances. There was a war on. In Part 5 of Tales from Hollywood, we look at the upsurge of patriotism in the early 40s and the somber mood that set in once the war was over.
You're no good for anyone but me. You're no good and neither am I. That's why we deserve each other.
After innovating with the film noir, RKO hits trouble when two of its key employees fall victim to the communist witch hunts of 1947.
Are you a member of the Communist Party? Or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
It's unfortunate and tragic that I have to teach this committee the basic principles of Americanism.
That's not the question. The question is, have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?